Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sharing Wisdom. I'm your host, Angie Wisdom, and today's podcast is going to be a little bit different. I've got a guest here that she's going to share her personal story, which kind of blew my mind. I mean, have you ever heard about people talking about how your body will send you messages? Your body will tell you when you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, when you're stressed, when you're burnt out. She brings that whole theory to a whole new level. Literally persevered and kept ignoring what her body was telling her and ended up waking up with an autoimmune disease directly related to it that actually went away once she changed her course. So I'm going to let her share the story with you. But she's had a TED Talk and she now has this program Inside Out, which really helps people connect with their bodies to understand the messaging and the signs that you're receiving to really lead your life in the right direction. Lamiaa Daif is here to join me, and you are going to love her story and her practical takeaways. So let's tune in. Lamiaa, thanks so much for being here. You know, your story, which I'm going to have you share, I think is so relatable to people. What you told me earlier about the green light being on the outside, like everything looked the way it was supposed to be and success was happening. So you kept persevering and going, but inside having that disconnection, I think people are going to hear that and go, oh my gosh, yes, me too. So start us so that people really understand more about that and what transpired eventually when you really kind of hit that wall.
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. It's so wonderful to be here and to talk about this topic that I think is really important. And I got to understand that it's not only my story, it's most of people's stories. It feels like a journey that we all go through as we, try to discover who we are at the end. So 8 years ago, I lived in Paris at that time. I was the youngest director in the largest private equity fund in Europe. I was about to marry my college sweetheart. I had a beautiful life, enjoying everything Paris had to offer, success, career, money, recognition, all of it. And yet, inside of me, something was off, something that I couldn't put into words. And, it started as insomnia, constant anxiety, stress, tense, overwhelmed, like gut issues, like just all these symptoms that I couldn't really understand that I was having. And initially, I just pushed them off. I just ignored them. They're just on the path. So I'll just keep going. As you said earlier, green lights everywhere. Everyone was telling me I was doing the right thing. I was on the right path. So I just kept going. But one day, my body yelled enough and forced me to pause. I woke up with a face that was completely deformed, and my body was full of hives from head to toe. And initially I thought it was an allergy, but it wasn't. In fact, I woke up that way for many months until I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And interestingly, my mom, who is a doctor, told me, well, autoimmune diseases don't start just like that. Maybe you want to talk to someone. Is there something off inside of you? And at that time, I wasn't ready to listen. I wasn't ready to accept it. I ended up going to see a therapist who asked me this question. She said, Lamiaa, you're portraying this perfect life you have. But let me just ask you one thing. Is this what you truly want? Is this life what you really want? And I remember that as she was saying that, my stomach churned. And I left her office and told my mom. I called my mom and I was like, you said I should go and see a therapist. I did. She doesn't get me. I'm not going anymore. But for 5 seconds, I allowed myself, to just have that honest day. She's right. She is right. But I'm not ready. I'm not ready because this is all I know. This is who I am. I identified so much with this life that I've worked hard for 10 years in this private equity career, for 10 years in this relationship, and we were about to get married. I mean, who am I outside of this? And so I kept going. I was like, okay, so doctors will find something that help with the body. I keep going. But life doesn't just work that way. 2 years later, I moved from Paris to New York. And then the moment of truth happened where I started what I call a double divorce from my husband and my job. And everything collapsed. So that perfect
Mm,
life that I was scared to leave was gone. So it
mm,
was the hardest time of my life. And yet, as I was going through it, lost, angry, devastated, I didn't have any hives. My blood work was completely normal. And finally, I could now connect and hear that voice telling me it's going to be okay.
wow.
And that's when the journey started to understand that all this time, my body knew. My body knew what my mind didn't want to hear and didn't want to accept because I was
Hmm.
scared and because it was not what I was told and taught since I'm a little girl. I
Hmm.
wanted to be the good girl. I did everything to be the good girl, ticked all the boxes, but that wasn't my truth.
Yeah.
And I like to think of our bodies as our inner truth tellers. My
Hmm.
body was telling me that this wasn't it. And I didn't listen. And I tried, I was creative in finding solutions outside of me. I was like,
Sure,
okay,
sure.
problem solving hat. Maybe I should do more of this. And when I get this, then I'm going to be okay. You get in this trap of, I call it the when then trap, like when this, then that.
Right.
I tried all of it, moving cities, another promotion, more money, more this, more that. And it wasn't it. The solution was to connect within. It wasn't outside of me, it was inside of me. That's how I became aware of why this inner conflict that I felt for so many years, like why when the world told me I should be happy and fulfilled and I am not, and feeling a lot of guilt and shame to have those thoughts and feelings. I thought I
Yeah.
was, one of those eternally unsatisfied people who, no matter what they have, they're not happy. Well,
Hmm.
maybe there is a reason.
Sure. Yeah. It's amazing. The human body, you hear about people saying, well, eventually you'll feel the
Yeah,
things that you're not tending to, whether it's stress in the form of a headache in your shoulders, body ailments. But I'm hearing you say that all of the signs that you kind of ignored and you pushed through, eventually it manifested into something so great, literally into an autoimmune disease, just from not tending to what was going on internally that you were not willing to face. I mean, that's just talk about your body sending you a message. I mean, loud and clear.
very clear. If
Yeah.
you've heard of the book of Gabor Mate, When the Body Says No. So
Mm-hmm.
everything is in the title. I love this book and the work he does, which in my healing journey allowed me to understand this relationship between the mind and the body. Like, how are these things working? And why aren't they working sometimes?
Mm-hmm.
Created
Absolutely.
distance and conflict. And so, yeah, the way I saw it, and he talks about, and he did a lot of like studies and talks about a lot of people's journeys and different ways it manifests in the body. One, the reason why he called it When the Body Says No, the cost of hidden stress. It's like all those situations in life when we don't say no,
Mm-hmm.
when we can't say no, that creates this internal stress coming from, past trauma, fears, conditionings, automatic patterns, all these things that are just running on autopilot that makes you scared to be authentic or to authentically express. And I can really identify with that. I think the people pleaser type of behavior and
Sure.
willing to keep peace and avoid conflict. And be perfect for everyone at work, at home, with family, all of it. At some point, that no, that is so important to express. Well, if you don't do it, your body will do it for you.
Yeah,
So
it'll show up
learn that.
eventually. Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm wondering if you look back, and it's always easy, hindsight's 2020, right? But if you look back, what do you think was the first sign that you decided to neglect, ignore, push down, treat symptomatically that would have taken you down a different road?
That's a really good question. I think there is a story that might illustrate that. Um, when it happened, again, it's in hindsight. When it happened, I think I didn't realize how big this was until a few
Hmm.
years later. So, my first year as an analyst in my private equity fund, I was working crazy hours, 2 to 3 a.m. in the morning at the office, weekends. You've been there, you know how it is.
Yes.
And so I was eagerly waiting for my end of year interview with my boss. And so we go through, the annual appraisal, and he says, "Great job, blah, blah, blah." And as I'm leaving his office, he says, "Lamiaa, I just have an advice for you. If you really want to succeed and you have everything to succeed in this world, you should try to smile less."
Hmm.
And I go back to my desk and I'm a little bit like, what? Smile less. And at that time, I was 22. I looked around me and I realized that, in fact, people don't smile here. Mostly men, old men with gray hair, which is not what I represent. So there's always already like this gap that I need to fill.
Hmm.
And it's true, they don't smile that much. And what I wanted at this time was to succeed and be taken seriously. So if it meant leaving my smile at home, I would leave it. But it doesn't work just that way. I didn't only leave it at home. It really changed who I was, because smiling
Sure.
is who I am. And so I think this story of not saying no, not realizing that, wait, it's not about adapting. It's not about learning a skill or bridging a
Hmm.
gap to be, you know, the good professional, the good performer on the team. It's changing something that represents who I am, genuinely
As a
who,
person.
as a
Yeah.
person.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounded like a small concession, but it was a big one. And there were 1,000 others that started after this one. And
Mhm.
so if I had to change one thing going back, would be when someone asked me to change my core, adapt my core so I can fit into whatever mold they want me to be. Not even talking about the person's own securities and projections.
Mhm.
Like I'm really talking about my own response to it would be to take a moment to step back and realize that this is not okay. This is actually who I am.
Right.
And fun fact, 8 years later, there is this opportunity to go to our New York office and build our team there. And I always wanted to move from Paris to New York, and I ended up having the opportunity to do it in our team. And when I asked my boss why me, because I was the youngest and they could have sent someone more senior than I was, he said, "It's your way to genuinely connect with people," which for me is related to my smile that is very genuine. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So now it comes
Yes.
handy.
Right, right. Let's use that now, but as a general rule, let's not bring too much smiling into the picture. Yes. So you were really being asked to compromise your authentic self. And people
Totally.
don't, I don't think, realize at a core value, like what that does to your mindset, what that does to your psyche, your subconscious, and how you show up every single day. I mean, that is definitely changing who you are and your level of confidence. So as you moved through this, well, actually, I have another question for you. Have you ever done the Enneagram
No, but it's on
assessment?
my list. It's on my
You
list. I've heard
should.
so much about it.
You're probably in the lines of an achiever, and some people say you're not supposed to guess who people are. But, my question and why I'm asking you that is because obviously your drive to succeed
Mm.
was greater than your drive to kind of preserve who you were, your authenticity, your fulfillment, all of that. So I'm just curious for people listening, like, what was that thought every time you squished something down, every time you ignored a symptom? What was your driver and your focus? What was your mindset telling you?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I will take it and I'll confirm to you if that's
Okay.
the profile. That sounds very accurate. I think that underneath this willingness to succeed, it wasn't success for success. It was to be validated.
Yeah,
It was to feel
absolutely.
worthy. And at that
Hmm.
time, my vision of worthy was it's something that is given to me. It's not
Right.
something that exists within. And whether I am valedictorian or not, whether I get the promotion or not, it's not supposed to change that. And so I was completely giving that power away in some point to people, to labels, to jobs, all of it basically outside of me to tell me you are worthy.
Hmm.
And so it felt like I got in this race chasing that constant external validation that I wasn't given to myself and that looked like achievements because that's what I can quantify. Okay, so the first master's, the second master's, the job, getting into these like very tough competitive places, the next thing, the next that. And so it looked like this never-ending race, in fact, because as soon as I got that thing that felt will help me feel, okay, I can breathe now, or I feel that inner confidence, I feel that inner worth, or even self-love, to be honest, it wasn't there. It would maybe
Hmm.
give it to me for 5, 10 minutes, maybe a day max, that excitement and like dopamine hit from that achievement. But then there will be like this small thing that isn't positive would shift it again and be again, okay, I need to prove, I need to prove, I need to prove. And so that was a big realization for me is that I was completely addicted to this
Hmm.
external validation. Um, and that wasn't the way that I could feel those things that I wanted to feel, that I could live authentically. Because again, as the smile example that I shared with you, then if that means I need to adjust this and this in who I authentically am, well, I might do it, which
Hmm.
which is not the way. And I think the body story, that health crisis I had, was a big, big, big wake up call.
Sure. I
I
mean, you can't
tried,
ignore that.
right? I tried for
Yeah.
years to live that way, like let the outside tell me how I should feel about me inside of me. Like that didn't work. And so I should look for another way to do it.
Yeah. So you shifted. I mean, you went from this externally driven, seeking validation, approval, ignoring the signs, symptoms. You finally hit that wall. And as you declare kind of your double divorce, things started to shift. And now you've done a TEDx talk on it. You coach and you have a program that, you lead people through this model of inside out. So tell me a little bit about that journey. Like what happens when you start looking for the internal validation and you start listening to yourself on the inside instead of the outside?
Yeah, sure. So the first step, which I feel is the first step in anything we want to do when it comes to change, is awareness. And it's actually the
Hmm.
first step of the inside out model is recognizing things as they are without judgment, without even willing to change them initially. And that was a big mindset shift for me because I mean, we are wired in our societies to quickly fix things. And that's even what you hear at work. I would hear like, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. And
Hmm.
the most important thing to figure out is what is actually the problem. And that was the first phase is recognizing what was truly happening within me with honesty. That can be really scary. I wouldn't say it was just like this super easy journey. Like, oh, I'm just going on this journey to discover myself. Like, obviously, it's the most beautiful one I've been on, but also the hardest one,
Mm-hmm.
yet the most liberating. So recognizing how things are, and then moving deeper, which is the second step of the inside out model, which is reflect, is understanding the root cause. The other thing I realized is that for years I was addressing symptoms. So
Sure.
the annoying colleague, the deal I was working on, the job, the city, even the husband. But
Mm-hmm.
until I recognized what the root causes were, so we talked, for example, about this deep sense of unworthiness and looking for it outside of myself, other symptoms will come up. And I would still, keep like perpetuating these patterns in which I live on. So keep going deeper into, but what is really the deep problem? What is keeping me stuck? And also, what do I really want? Genuinely
Mm-hmm.
want. And here's where the body comes into it's yes, thinking, and we use our mind so easily every day, and they're powerful creatures, right? But the body brings a different source of intelligence. It's this raw and filtered truth that is just there. And so bringing both with me in this journey of not only thinking, but starting with feeling allowed me to get to better knowing myself, better knowing
Mm-hmm.
what I want, better knowing what I don't want, what I need to change, what I need to rewire. Um, so that kind of like was this big first phase, which by the way will never end. I feel like the more I know, the less I know. So it's
Mm-hmm.
this beautiful, never-ending discovery journey. And as I started getting, visibility and clarity over what I want and what I don't want, then I moved to, so how can this look like? So reinvention in some sense, and exploration of these things that actually are important to me or give me energy or I'm passionate about or have meaning for me or are things that I know I need to thrive. What type of environment, what type of people, what type of mission, what, like personally and professionally, because as I said, it was a double divorce, so it was a double change in
Right.
life. And then really taking that leap of faith and exploring it, starting with small experiments on projects, on things like that to make sure that this is what I want, and then fully commit and go for it. But again, it's not like one cycle that is,
Sure.
one and done. It's iterative, and I keep
Mm-hmm.
iterating on it. The more I learn and the more I evolve, and always bringing the body with me in this journey. It really moved from like sometimes I am even still surprised of how I feel like when I committed to my body that now we're a team and you're actually my accountability partner,
Mm.
it just shows me instantly through physical sensations if this feels right or not.
It's very
And
interesting.
yeah,
You know, we, obviously in my coaching space and with many coaches, you hit on some key points. Anyone listening that follows along or as my client is going, oh, awareness, like we talk about that all the time being the first thing, and I also wrote down, you know, investigating, figuring out what you really want, all of that discovery piece. So a lot of that is common practice as you're going through this, but bringing in the body physically isn't something that too many people talk about, really tapping into what is your body telling you. So I'm curious. I mean, I love the way you just framed it up as telling your body, hey, you're my accountability partner. We're a team here. What are some practical tools or action items that people can do to really get their body involved and partner with it?
totally. So the first thing I do, and I still do it every day, is there are two moments in the day, in the morning and the evening, where I have a little check-in with my body. In fact, not only with my body, with my mind too, but
Mm-hmm.
create that space when I wake up in the morning of going through like a body scan and just feeling like, how are you feeling right now? What do you need right now? Is there any tension that I'm feeling somewhere? And if I'm feeling it, try to understand, why do I feel it?
Mm-hmm.
Is it an apprehension about something coming up? Is it what I've done the previous day? Is it a message that I need rest? Like, what is it about? And I do the same thing with my mind. What am I telling myself right now? What's going on here? Again, because it is related, right? Like thoughts will influence those feelings that then will influence my behavior and actions and so on, and creates this
Sure.
cycle. So I do that every morning just to like create that connection, which I carry forward during the day. And anytime I have this like big emotional reaction, or like I just
Mm-hmm.
feel this tension or tingling or pain, or even something very pleasant that I'm feeling right now, is I've had a lot of goosebumps as we're talking. Like these are all signals that have a meaning. And so instead of just feeling and going, I literally stop for a few seconds and be like, what just happened right now? What is this about?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's unpack it for a second. And then in the evening, similarly to the morning, I go through a check-in again. But I go also through this checking, looking back to these moments that I've noticed for a few seconds. And I take a moment to journal about them, to really reflect and ask myself, okay, what happened here? What has driven that, feeling, sensation, thought, behavior? What are the insights that I can gain from it? What can I learn from it? And if this has to happen again, what would I do differently? Or what would I want to feel differently? And so that's a very simple way to start building that connection again, which we always had. I mean, look at
Mm-hmm.
kids around you, the babies around you. They are teaching us how we were born with this connection. They feel, they express. They don't let the overthinking come in the way. And so it's just about relearning what we already know by creating these moments of consciousness and awareness throughout the day as a first step. And then when there is like a big decisions to be made, or like something coming up that I feel as soon as I start thinking about it, like creates those, the apprehension, the anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
the, spinning wheel in my head, is to take a moment to do a longer check-in with my body, go through it again, and again, ask my body, what are you feeling? What are you trying to tell me? What is this about? And let it emerge naturally with no judgment, and see
Love
what
that.
comes up.
This is so powerful. I'm stealing all of this because, I have a practice that a lot of my clients do, and other listeners, right? This morning mindset practice. And it's all about getting in your mind, right? And diving there. But I love this element of adding in the physical aspect of it, because there are things that sometimes your mind maybe doesn't bring. And I'm a believer in our three levels, right? Your head, your heart, and your gut. But really doing this scan to understand what your body's feeling and what you're holding and what it's related to, I think is just so powerful. So I hope that people will really try that out. I know I'm going to, because just like anything else, when you get into this pattern of using something like scanning your body, tuning into it, you become closer and more connected to it so that you can use it going forward. And how many
Absolutely.
times have we heard people say, oh, I should have listened to my gut?
Yeah,
I knew it. I had
I
this
knew it.
feeling. Yes. But they didn't listen because they
Yeah,
don't have that relationship. They don't have that relationship of trust with their physical body to
abs-
go, oh, I'm not ignoring that.
absolutely. And actually, to add to your practice, which I
Yes.
absolutely love, is when I go through, so I run a workshop, and the first step of that workshop on how to reconnect with your body's kind of like wisdom is what I call observe like a detective.
Mm,
We go through a simple framework that is the 3 Bs: body, belief, behavior. And so
mm,
we start with the physical sensations that I shared with you. Then we move to the beliefs, which is the mind, and then the behavior, what I do or not do, say or not say. And what's actually really interesting and where the magic happens is when you start looking at these 3 Bs and see if there is alignment or misalignment. That's when you know that you're not being authentic. If you're
mm.
feeling something in your physical body, yet you're creating all these stories and narratives to keep you safe because that's how we're wired, like, and the mind is so amazing at doing that. And then you act by overriding your body, that gut feeling you had, or like that heart chest sensation.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you're like, oh, okay, let's pause and see what's going on.
Right. Right. Which I think is so helpful, especially in the sense that I'm a big believer that, our thoughts generate our feelings, generate our actions, right? So being able to check both of those, the way you feel, but is that in alignment with the way I think? Because our mind is really great at making up stories,
Mhm.
like you're saying, they keep you safe and they make up stories from that area. But I'm also saying stories where it's holding you back, right? Or it's telling you about all this fear coming into play or this worry. So really checking to see if those align is super, super powerful. I love that component of it. I'm so excited to add this to a practice from the
That's
mental
amazing.
perspective, add in the physical side of it. So this has been just a really, really enlightening conversation for me. And I hope that the people listening are also, kind of giving this a little extra thought as far as the physical aspect and listening to your body. So as we wrap up here, because I could go on and on and on forever, share anything else that you think is really important for people to know or understand about your work and this connection with the body and this transformation.
Sure. So I think that if there was one message that I've learned in my journey is that all those answers I was looking for and I am looking for are inside of me. They're
Mm.
not outside. The answers, the solutions start from within. And so that is truly my message. And what I encourage people to do is before hearing all the voices outside of you, and obviously we all have advisors and mentors and it's wonderful. But before going outside, build your own connection with your truth first. And in that journey, your body is your best ally. Your body isn't just here to carry you around, to move you from point A to point B. It's truly your life partner. And so if you nurture it and build that connection with you, it will guide you. It will guide you to those answers that you're looking for.
So powerful. I often think, and you as a coach, this, that we don't give people the answers. We ask questions so that they can find
Exactly.
the answers.
Right?
Yes. And I'm a
Full
big
circle.
advocate, yes, of saying, like, ask yourself the questions. You have the answer inside of you. Ask yourself the questions. And now this other element, I think about, you probably do this too. When you coach, you'll see somebody physically do something, like maybe they take a big sigh, or their chest really moves, and you'll question that physical
Yeah,
action. So
exactly.
this is a way that now, again, question that, be curious about what that physical action is. Sorry, I'm just kind of like thinking, wow, there's so many great pieces for people to put into action here. So
Thank you.
yes, you have
This
the
is such a
answers.
wonderful. Yes,
You do have a free workshop.
I do. I do. It's
Yeah.
called Find Clarity Within: 3 Steps to Decode Your Body's Messages. And I created this workshop after my TEDx talk when I had a lot of people reach out saying, me too. I've been
Hmm.
going through this, or I've been through it, or I feel that actually I realize I'm going through it. But how do you practically reconnect. What did you do? What do you do to do it? And so I packaged my tools, everything I've learned in the past 8 years in a very actionable, practical, it's also an interactive 1 hour workshop. So whoever wants to attend, they can go on my website, lamia.com, and sign up. The next one is probably going to be sometime in August, where we go through these tools that hopefully they can bring home and, support their journey in reconnecting with themselves.
I love it. So you all tune into the workshop. You also have your TED Talk out there. So I will connect that in the show notes as well. So people have different ways to get in touch with you. Any other social platforms or anything like that they should be
Yes.
following you along on?
Sure. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, Lamiaa Daif. It's a long name, but hopefully in the notes it will be there where
Yes.
I share, practical tools, frameworks. I love frameworks. It's how my brain works. And so try to make it easy to remember, actionable, practical for people so they can also connect with me there.
Amazing. And for those of you who are already trying to type in the website, it's Lamiaa is Lamia. So you can get on there right away, but we'll have everything in the show notes as well. Lamia, thank you so much for sharing your story. You truly are this light, this beacon of light for people who are listening and going, I have felt this, and now I know that I'm not alone and there's something I can do about it. So I thank you for sharing your story and your message on how to get through this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for creating this space to have this conversation. It was so wonderful. Beautiful way to start the day. And my body thanks you. I still have tingling. So
Oh, good. I love it. I love it. You are welcome. So for those of you listening, if you're going, this is such a great conversation, someone else needs to hear, please send them the link, share the podcast with them, comment, like it. We love to hear your feedback and listen to your body.
Wonderful.